The police arrested Vanessa Holt at 6 a.m. the following morning. Detective Cross had worked through the night after Marcus provided the enhanced footage, tracing the phone number to Tommy Reardon, who quickly gave up both Rick and Vanessa in exchange for a reduced sentence. The evidence was overwhelming: text messages, bank transfers to Tommy's account, security footage from the warehouse meeting. Vanessa's crimson armor cracked in the interrogation room. "He was mine first," she'd screamed at Detective Cross. "That baby was going to ruin everything. She didn't deserve him." The confession sealed her fate. Conspiracy to commit assault, attempted harm to an unborn child, solicitation of violence. The charges mounted while news crews gathered outside the precinct. By noon, the story had broken: billionaire's mistress arrested in plot to harm pregnant wife. Marcus's empire took the hit he deserved. Board members demanded his resignation. Business partners distanced themselves. The Singapore deal collapsed. His face appeared on every tabloid cover, labeled as the man whose affair had nearly killed his own child. He accepted it all without fighting back, because none of it mattered compared to the woman sitting in their nursery, staring at yellow walls and refusing to speak to him. "Elena," Marcus said from the doorway that evening, his voice raw, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need to tell you the truth about everything." Elena didn't turn around. "I already know about Vanessa. The detective told me. Not just Vanessa. About who I became. About every choice I made that led to this." Marcus sat on the floor beside her, keeping distance between them. "I convinced myself that providing financially was the same as being present. That building wealth meant building a family. I was so focused on acquiring things that I forgot to value what I already had." His voice cracked. "I watched that footage 50 times, Elena. 50 times I heard you beg those men not to hurt our baby. And every time, I heard you say my husband is waiting, and I wanted to die because you needed me and I wasn't there. I'm never there." Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were empty. "Why are you telling me this now? Because you got caught? Because it's public? Because I watched the woman I love suffer alone, and I realized that every dollar I've made is worthless if you and our daughter aren't safe." Marcus's hands trembled. "I'm selling Brennan Tower. Restructuring the company with new leadership. I'm stepping back from everything that took me away from you." "I don't want your money or your grand gestures," Elena said quietly. "I wanted you at my doctor's appointments. I wanted you to feel our daughter kick. I wanted my husband back. I know. And I can't give you back the time I wasted." Marcus wiped his eyes. "But I can show up now. Every day. Every appointment. Every moment. Not because I have to, but because there's nowhere else I want to be." Elena was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I need you to leave our bedroom. I need space to decide if I can trust you again." "Okay," Marcus said simply. He moved into the guest room that night. The next morning, he attended Elena's appointment with Dr. Wei, the first he'd ever made. He took notes on everything, asked questions, held Elena's coat even though she didn't acknowledge him. He did the same the following week, and the week after that. He didn't make excuses or grand speeches. He simply showed up. He enrolled in parenting classes and attended every session. He interviewed pediatricians and researched car seat safety ratings. He learned to cook the meals Elena craved and left them in the fridge without asking for gratitude. When she had nightmares, he heard her crying through the walls but respected her request for space, simply leaving notes outside her door. "I'm here if you need me." Slowly, painfully slowly, Elena began to soften. 6 weeks after Vanessa's arrest, Elena found Marcus reading a parenting book at 2 a.m. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Want to be prepared," he replied. Chapter 7 covers what to do if the baby won't latch during breastfeeding. Something in Elena's chest loosened slightly. "You're really trying." "I'm really trying," Marcus confirmed. "And I'll keep trying for the rest of my life." 2 months later, Elena woke Marcus at 3 a.m. "It's time." The drive to the hospital was quiet, but Marcus held her hand through every contraction. In the delivery room, Dr. Wei smiled at them. Ready to meet your daughter. Labor was long and difficult. Elena squeezed Marcus's hand so hard she left marks. He whispered encouragement, wiped her forehead, never left her side even when the nurses offered him breaks. At 4:17 p.m., their daughter arrived, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with Elena's dark eyes and a furious cry that made them both laugh through tears. "She's perfect," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking as Dr. Wei placed the baby in Elena's arms. Elena looked down at their daughter, then up at Marcus. For the first time in months, she saw the man she'd married, present, vulnerable, real. "Her name is Hope," Elena said softly. "Because even in the darkest times, we have to believe in second chances." Marcus leaned down, kissing his wife's forehead, then his daughter's. "I promise you both, I'll spend every day proving I deserve this. Not with money or power, but by being here. By being the father and husband you need." 3 weeks later, Elena woke to find Marcus asleep in the nursery rocking chair, baby Hope tucked safely in his arms, a half-read children's book open on his lap. Sunlight streamed through the yellow walls, and for the first time since that terrible night, Elena felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace. Because she'd learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even after you've failed, and choosing differently every single day. And Marcus had finally learned that true wealth isn't measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in the trust of those who give you another chance to get it right. The apartment Elena rented was nothing like the penthouse she'd left behind. It occupied the 3rd floor of an older building in the university district, with wooden floors that creaked and windows that overlooked a small bookstore. She'd signed the lease using her maiden name, Elena Morgan, and paid 6 months in advance with funds from an account Marcus had never known existed. Her first night alone, she didn't cry. Instead, she sat at the simple desk she'd purchased that afternoon and opened her laptop. The screen illuminated her face in the darkness as she logged into the financial systems she'd built years ago, systems Marcus had never bothered to examine closely. E. Morgan Holdings. That was the name on the paperwork. Elena had established it during their 2nd year of marriage, when Marcus's startup was still struggling. She'd used her own mathematics research grants, her consulting fees, and a small inheritance from her grandmother to create an investment fund. The fund's first investment had been in her husband's company, 40% of the initial capital that got Marcus's platform off the ground. But she hadn't stopped there. Over the years, as Marcus's company grew, Elena had quietly positioned herself in every major deal. When Marcus needed bridge financing for his first acquisition, E. Morgan Holdings provided it. When investors hesitated before his Series B funding, Elena's fund committed first, giving others confidence to follow. When Marcus expanded internationally, it was Elena's shell corporations that secured the real estate and negotiated the partnerships. She'd done it all anonymously, always through lawyers and intermediaries, because Marcus had made it clear early on that he needed to be seen as a self-made man. "Investors want to back a lone genius," he told her once. "Not someone who needed his wife's help." So Elena had helped invisibly, weaving herself into the foundation of his empire so thoroughly that removing her would cause the entire structure to collapse. Her phone buzzed. "Dr. Ruth Mendoza. You left," Ruth's text read. "Are you safe?" "I'm free," Elena typed back. Then she added, "and I'm ready to remember who I am." The next morning, Elena began making calls. Not angry calls, not vengeful ones, but professional conversations with lawyers, accountants, and the investors who'd trusted E. Morgan Holdings for years. She requested copies of every contract, every agreement, every guarantee she'd ever signed. The stack of documents that arrived over the next 3 days was substantial. Elena spread them across her apartment floor, creating a map of Marcus's business empire. Each paper represented a thread she'd woven. Each signature, her signature, hidden behind corporate entities, represented a piece of leverage she'd never intended to use. Until now. Meanwhile, across the city in the penthouse, Marcus barely registered Elena's absence. He'd noticed her suitcases were gone, noticed the closet was half empty, but he assumed she'd gone to visit her sister or needed space after the party. He was too distracted by Cassandra's presence, by the intoxicating validation of being wanted by someone so visible, so perfectly curated for his new life. "Your wife actually left?" Cassandra asked on the 3rd morning, scrolling through her phone while Marcus made coffee. She'll come back, Marcus said dismissively. Elena's not bold enough to actually leave. She has nowhere else to go. What Marcus didn't know was that at that exact moment, Elena was sitting across from Thomas Chen, the managing partner at Silverman & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. I need you to understand, Elena said quietly, sliding a folder across the mahogany desk. I don't want to destroy him. I want to extract myself completely and legally from every business arrangement we're entangled in. Thomas opened the folder. His eyebrows rose as he scanned the documents. Mrs. Webb. Ms. Morgan, please. That's my legal name on all these contracts. Ms. Morgan, Thomas corrected himself. You realize what this represents? You're not a silent partner. You're the primary creditor and stakeholder in at least 60% of his active deals. I know, Elena said. I built it that way. Now I need to unbuild it. Thomas leaned back in his chair. If you exercise your rights under these agreements simultaneously, his entire operation will freeze. Is that really what you want? Elena thought of Marcus's laugh at the party, thought of being called outdated, a beta version, an embarrassment. She thought of 7 years of making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. I want, she said carefully, to stop guaranteeing the success of someone who sees me as a liability. What happens after that is his responsibility, not mine. Thomas nodded slowly. This will take approximately 1 week to execute properly. We'll need to notify all parties, file the appropriate paperwork, and coordinate the withdrawals to remain within legal bounds. 1 week is perfect, Elena said. She left the law office and walked through the city she'd lived in for 7 years but had rarely explored. Marcus had always been too busy for museums, for bookstores, for the small cafes where people lingered over conversations. She'd forgotten what it felt like to move through the world at her own pace. Her phone rang. Marcus. She let it go to voicemail. Elena, where are you? This is getting ridiculous. I have the Harrison deal closing tomorrow, and I need you too. He paused. Just come home. We'll talk about whatever's bothering you. Elena deleted the message without finishing it. That evening, she met Dr. Mendoza for dinner at a small Ethiopian restaurant. How are you really? Ruth asked, her eyes kind but searching. I'm remembering, Elena said, that before I was Marcus Webb's wife, I was the woman who graduated top of my class in applied mathematics. I published 3 papers on algorithmic trading before I was 25. I was someone. Ruth reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You still are, Elena. You were just investing in the wrong venture. Elena smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes. Life lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what you built for someone else and start building for yourself. Your value doesn't decrease when someone fails to see it. Thursday evening arrived wrapped in autumn rain. Elena sat in her prenatal class at the Mercy Medical Building, practicing breathing exercises with 7 other expectant mothers. The instructor, a cheerful nurse named Patricia, demonstrated positions for labor while Elena's mind wandered. She'd texted Marcus earlier asking if he wanted to feel the baby kicking. He'd responded 3 hours later with a thumbs-up emoji. Remember, ladies, Patricia said, these final weeks are about preparation and rest. Listen to your bodies. Ask for help when you need it. Elena smiled weakly. She'd been asking for help for months. The silence had become her answer. Class ended at 8:30. The other women left in pairs or were met by hovering partners. Elena gathered her materials alone, taking the elevator down to the basement parking garage. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the concrete pillars. Her small sedan sat in the far corner where she always parked, the free section, not the paid spots closer to the elevator. She clicked her key fob. Nothing happened. She tried again. The car remained dark and silent. No, 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 Elena whispered, frustration mixing with exhaustion. She'd meant to have the battery checked last week, but had run out of time between grading her kindergarten students' artwork and preparing freezer meals for after the baby arrived. She pulled out her phone to call roadside assistance, but the signal was weak in the underground garage. She'd have to walk to the exit ramp where reception was better. Adjusting her bag on her shoulder, Elena started toward the garage entrance, her footsteps echoing in the near-empty space. She didn't notice the two men emerge from behind a concrete pillar until they were blocking her path. Tommy and Rick had been waiting for 40 minutes, watching from the shadows. They'd studied her photo, knew her car, had planned their approach. The garage security camera was positioned at the entrance. They'd stay in the blind spot. Quick, efficient, then disappear into the rainy night. "Excuse me," Elena said politely, trying to step around them. Her heart rate quickened, instinct screaming danger even as she tried to stay calm. Tommy moved to block her again. "Where you going in such a hurry?" "Please, I just need to get to the exit." Elena's hand moved to her stomach protectively. "My husband is waiting for me." It was a lie. Marcus was at a dinner meeting downtown. But fear sharpened her thinking, and she hoped the mention of someone waiting would make them leave her alone. Rick grabbed her arm, and Elena's breath caught in terror. "Looks like you got something valuable there," he said, nodding at her belly. "Be a shame if something happened to it." "Please," Elena gasped, tears already streaming down her face. "Please don't hurt my baby. I have money, my purse, take it, take everything." Tommy shoved her against the concrete wall, not hard enough to truly injure but enough to frighten. Elena cried out, both arms wrapping around her stomach as she slid partially down the wall. The baby kicked frantically inside her, as if sensing her mother's terror. "Please, please, I'm begging you," Elena sobbed, her voice breaking. "My baby, I'll do anything, just don't hurt my baby." The raw desperation in her voice gave Rick pause. This wasn't some abstract job anymore. This was a terrified woman protecting her unborn child. For a brief second, doubt flickered across his face. But Tommy had been paid to complete a task. He raised his hand as if to strike. That's when the whistle pierced the air. "Hey! Security! Stay where you are!" A guard had emerged from the stairwell, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. Tommy and Rick bolted immediately, sprinting toward the exit ramp and disappearing into the rain-soaked night. The guard ran to Elena, who was shaking violently, still pressed against the wall. Are you hurt? Did they?" "My baby," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Is my baby okay?" The guard immediately called 911 while helping Elena sit down carefully. She couldn't stop trembling, couldn't catch her breath, her hands pressed to her stomach as if she could hold her daughter safe through sheer force of will. What Elena didn't know was that the entire attack had been captured by Camera 7, a recently installed security device that covered the previously blind spot. Every moment, her fear, her pleas, her desperate attempt to protect her child, was recorded in high-definition clarity. In that footage, time-stamped 8:47 p.m., was the evidence that would eventually destroy Vanessa Holt's carefully constructed world. But that discovery was still days away. For now, paramedics arrived, Dr. Way was called, and Elena was rushed to the emergency room while Marcus's phone rang unanswered in his pocket during his business dinner. The night everything changed had begun. The Grand Meridian Hotel glittered like a jewel box as limousines deposited the city's elite at its entrance. The Children's Hospital Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, where million-dollar donations were announced between champagne toasts and orchestra music. Marcus arrived with Vanessa on his arm, her crimson dress turning heads as they entered. "Remember," Marcus said quietly, "we're here for the Riverside Project. Senator Michaels will be announcing his support tonight, and half our investors are in this room." Vanessa smiled, but her eyes were calculating. Of course. Strictly business. She'd perfected the role of professional associate, knowing exactly how far to stand from him in public, how to laugh at his jokes without seeming too familiar. But inside, anxiety gnawed at her. 3 months ago, Marcus had mentioned casually that Elena was pregnant. Vanessa had smiled through clenched teeth, assuring herself it changed nothing. Marcus was bored with domestic life. He'd told her so himself during their second meeting, when bourbon had loosened his tongue. But tonight, something shifted. They were standing near the bar when Thomas Reynolds, Marcus's attorney, approached with congratulations. "Heard about the baby, Marcus. You must be thrilled. Have you started the trust fund paperwork yet? With your assets, you'll want everything properly structured before the birth." Marcus nodded. Actually, I'm updating my will next week. Making sure the child is protected, inheritance provisions, the usual. The words hit Vanessa like ice water. Inheritance provisions. Trust funds. Legal protections. This wasn't just about Marcus having a baby. It was about that baby securing a permanent place in his life, his wealth, his future. And where did that leave her? She excused herself to the powder room, her mind racing. In 7 years of careful planning, she'd positioned herself as indispensable to Marcus's business, had made herself the exciting alternative to his mundane home life. But a child? A child was permanence. A child was legacy. A child meant Elena would never truly disappear, even if Marcus eventually divorced her. Vanessa pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She scrolled through her contacts until she found it, a number given to her 2 years ago by a client whose husband had needed discouragement from pursuing a hostile business takeover. She'd never imagined she'd use it. The text was simple: need to discuss a sensitive matter. Willing to pay well for discretion. The response came within minutes. Tomorrow. Pier 47 Warehouse. 8 p.m. The next evening, Vanessa met Tommy in a warehouse that smelled of oil and rust. He was broad-shouldered with cold eyes, and he brought his associate Rick, a wiry man who barely spoke. Vanessa wore sunglasses despite the indoor setting, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "I need someone frightened," she said bluntly. "Not hurt, just scared badly enough to experience complications." Tommy understood immediately. Pregnant woman. Vanessa's silence was confirmation. She slid an envelope across the table containing $5,000 in cash. "There's another $10,000 when it's done. It needs to look random. A mugging gone wrong, a parking lot incident, whatever. No connections to anyone." Tommy counted the bills slowly. "When?" "Soon. Within the week. She has routines, prenatal classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings at the Mercy Medical Building. She parks in the basement garage. Usually alone." Rick finally spoke, his voice like gravel. "What if something goes really wrong? These things can be unpredictable." Vanessa's jaw tightened. She thought of Marcus's hand on her back at the gala, the way he'd pulled away when his phone showed Elena calling. She thought of trust funds and inheritance provisions and a future where she was erased by a woman who'd done nothing except be there first. "That's a risk I'm willing to take," she said coldly. After she left, Tommy and Rick exchanged glances. "She's ice cold," Rick muttered. "She's desperate," Tommy corrected. "Desperate people pay well. We do the job, take the money, disappear. Simple." But nothing about what they were planning was simple. In a nursery across town, Elena was folding tiny clothes, humming softly to the daughter growing inside her. In his office, Marcus was reviewing contracts, oblivious to the danger circling his family. And in her luxury apartment, Vanessa poured herself wine with trembling hands, trying to convince herself that what she'd set in motion was survival, not murder. The wheels were turning. In 4 days, everything would change. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Brennan Tower penthouse as Marcus stood with his phone pressed to his ear. His steel-grey suit was perfectly tailored, his expression carved from the same cold precision that had built his real estate empire. Across the city, in their modest suburban home, Elena sat in the nursery she'd been painting herself, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "The Singapore investors want another meeting," Marcus said into the phone, not to Elena, but to his assistant. "Move my Thursday. Cancel whatever's there." He didn't notice the calendar reminder that flashed on his laptop screen, Elena's 28-week checkup, 2 p.m. Thursday. Elena had stopped sending him reminders 3 months ago. At first, she'd texted him before every appointment, hoping he'd surprise her by showing up. Then she'd called. Then she'd simply mentioned them over dinner, watching his eyes glaze over as he scrolled through emails. Now she went alone, smiling politely when Dr. Wei asked if her husband would join them next time. That afternoon, Marcus met Vanessa Holt at Central, an upscale restaurant where privacy booths cost more than most people's monthly rent. Vanessa wore crimson, always crimson, and her smile was calculated perfection. She'd been his marketing consultant for the Riverside Development Project, but somewhere between presentations and late-night strategy sessions, the lines had blurred. "You seem distracted," Vanessa said, her fingers brushing his across the table. "The deal is practically closed. You should be celebrating." Marcus forced a smile. "Just tired. Elena hasn't been sleeping well. The baby keeps her up." The mention of Elena made Vanessa's smile tighten almost imperceptibly. She changed the subject quickly, leaning forward to discuss the gala they'd attend together next week. Marcus would tell Elena it was a business obligation. He always did. The lies had become so smooth they no longer required conscious thought. Meanwhile, Elena sat in Dr. Wei's examination room, listening to her daughter's heartbeat through the ultrasound monitor. The steady thump-thump-thump filled the quiet space, and tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Is everything all right, Elena?" Dr. Wei asked gently, pausing the examination. "I'm fine," Elena whispered, the same lie Marcus told himself every day. "Just emotional. Hormones, you know." But Dr. Wei had seen too many patients to miss the signs. "Is someone supporting you at home? Your husband?" Elena's hand moved protectively over her stomach. "Marcus is very busy. He's closing an important deal. I understand." What she didn't say was that she'd stopped understanding months ago. She didn't understand how the man who'd once surprised her with handwritten notes in her lunchbox now couldn't remember her doctor's name. She didn't understand how building luxury apartments for strangers had become more important than building a family with her. That evening, Marcus came home past midnight. Elena had fallen asleep on the couch, a half-assembled crib instruction manual spread across her lap. He looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, and something tightened in his chest. But his phone buzzed with another message from Vanessa, and the moment passed. He went to his home office, closing the door softly behind him. In the nursery, the walls Elena had painted pale yellow seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. She'd chosen yellow because she wanted their daughter to grow up surrounded by sunshine, even on the darkest days. What Elena didn't know was that darkness was already creeping closer, wearing crimson lipstick and a smile that never reached the eyes.